So can you walk us maybe through two different scenarios of what would make sense for, those two different groups?
Absolutely, and that's actually one of our secrets. We call the optimal timing transformational wealth plan cloning. How to clone a proven wealth plan with capital gains tax solutions and the financial advisors we work with in less than 5 hours to become time, energy, and debt free. So step number one, defining your sale. You're calculating that. We have a free calculator you can use for your capital gains tax liability. And then step number two is your ideal wealth plan, right? And then again, some of our clients, actually about 50 at least percent, don't need or want any income for the next few years. And they'll actually delay payments. And what that does is it lowers their overall net income tax they're receiving per year. Some of them need or want payments and they'll start to receive them right away, which is totally fine. Now, if the principal is in place, let's say it's 2.6 million and you earn about 8%, because what this is, just so everyone who understands this, what you're doing is you're saying, hey, I'm going to lend the 2.6 million to this trust, and it owes me all of that back plus interest rate, right? It's actually a promissory note. You're becoming the lender. And because you do it in that order, you are not taking what's called actual receipt of that cash. And so the tax isn't triggered today. So essentially you're delaying, you're deferring the capital gains tax. But in the meantime, hopefully it earns some interest. And most of the, in the investments that it goes into, it'll earn some interest. And then you can live off that interest and pay ordinary income tax on that slowly based upon your needs. But most people, like you said, right, they don't necessarily need 2.6 million all in one year. In fact, that sends their tax bracket through the roof, and they get completely wiped out, right? They'd say, well, I'd like to have just an income stream passively and keep that extra 600,000 working for me, right? It's really just a mathematical equation at that point, unless you need a ton of cash right now. And so we're going to map that out, but realize you can shift it along the way. You might say, you know what, I actually do want to buy that cool boat, or I want to travel the world with my family for a couple of years. And okay, how much is that going to cost? Well, $250,000 or whatever. Okay, great. Let's just send that out. Now you're going to pay tax on that when you receive it, right? Because it's personal use. Hey, no problem, right? But in the meantime, instead of paying it all on 2.6, you're paying it, let's say, on 2.4, right, or 2.35. So it all just depends on what you want. It's your money. How do you want to receive it? We're going to be just that group to help you stay within the guardrails of the trust and to be as tax optimized as possible. And that's really the key. So hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. So a lot of ways that you can structure, say, a business acquisition is you go to the owner and say, hey, look, if we give you a bunch of cash right now, you're going to have this huge tax liability. And so the owner sort of is incentivized, the seller is sort of incentivized to have like seller notes and kind of stretch it over a long period of time. The risk with that is you may not get paid, right? The business might tank. You might just sell it to someone that doesn't trust you, and the business just, never ends up paying you, and you fight legal battles, and it may not be it may not be enough money on the table to fight those legal battles. I've heard countless times of seller financing not working out. But the benefit of this seller financing is, you can delay your tax burdens. And so essentially what you're telling me is you can structure the same thing, but then you could do it with all the cash up front. So you don't have any of the liability of like, oh, I'm not going to get paid 5 years from now.
You got it, right? And we call this the Blockbuster versus Netflix secret of the deferred sales trust, okay? So do you remember going to Blockbuster in the days, Ryan, where you show up on a Friday night and you're excited about that movie? But so is probably 3 or 4 other people who just parked in the parking lot. And it depends on who gets in there first, because that, that stack of movies that's behind that cardboard is slowly going smaller. But you see that movie, right? And oh, it's there. And you're walking out, somebody reached out and grab that same movie, they look at you and they smile, and you guys are like, oh, everyone wanted that movie. Well, even if you got that movie, right, it's a bummer you lost it, but you have 3 days to return it. You have to rewind it. If you don't rewind it, you're going to get a penalty. If you late fee, it's just kind of an old way of doing things, right? Well, that's sort of like the traditional installment sale or the 1031 exchange, right? I call it transactional type of wealth plan or deal planning, right? And that it's restrictive. Typically, a seller carryback is short in nature, meaning it's 3 to 5 years, and they have really typically no prepayment penalties. And so, yeah, you get some tax deferral for a few years, but then they're going to pay it all, and then you're out. Versus the Netflix, which is the deferred sales trust way of doing things, you can go for as long as you want. These notes can go for 10 years. You can renew for 10, 10, 10, keep going, pass it to your kids. So essentially, you can go for as long as you want on this one. The other one, you're tied to that one single person. That's a good point you bring up, right? You're not diversified. You might have to take back that business, which could be, you're selling the business. You don't want to have the threat or the thought of having to take it back in case that person doesn't pay you. So you're not diversified. You're counting on one person to pay you, right? Whereas this one, you can actually, the collateral is tied to some of the biggest companies in the world. You can put it with Apple. Netflix, Google, Costco. You can put it into real estate venture of your own or with partners or a new business venture. In other words, you can diversify that 2.6 million over here versus carrying it back for one single person, right? So that's much more powerful. The next one is liquidity, right? You might need money, but this person's like, look, the business isn't doing so well. I can't pay you back right away. In this scenario, you can pull out the cash whenever you want and just pay the tax. So you have liquidity, diversification, longevity, and the last one is optimal timing. You know how Netflix, you can just sit there and just rent a movie? I mean, or just click on a movie. You don't have to rent it, right? You just click it and it's there. It's never sold out. There's never a return fee. You don't have to drive on a Friday night in the rain or in the snow if you're in Salt Lake, right? And try to park to go get it, right? It's a Netflix way of doing things. It's just a lot of people are still stuck in the Blockbuster way of doing things. And the other little nuance here is if you are buying a business from somebody, and especially if it's a good business, they don't necessarily want to give you seller financing, right? They say, come with your cash, right? And even if you're getting SBA financing, you may not even want their terms anyways, right? You want even a lower down payment, and you want SBA financing, which is phenomenal right now with rates, and give them a chance to cash out. And so if you approach them with the tax deferral strategy to say, hey, look, you were going to pay me, sell it for $3 million. I'll buy it for 2.8. You were going to pay $1 million in tax anyways, but I want you to talk to Ryan, who will connect with Brett, and they will help you save $1 million. Would you save it? Would you save me $200,000? So it's a number way to skin the cat. But the key is, how are you adding value as you're approaching to buy these businesses versus everybody else, right? If you're just competing on price, you only have to pay a little bit higher. But if you're helping them with terms and with planning, wow, you've created what's called a transformational wealth plan, which is what the Deferred Sales Trust does, versus just a transactional wealth plan, which is what the old seller carryback does, if that makes sense.